Christopoulos. I'm from the New York State Forum, and we welcome you to this Return to Work event. Today, we will be hearing from Joshua Edwards, past president of the New York Toastmasters Club out of Manhattan. Joshua will discuss effective presentation skills, which we thought was a timely issue, given the fact that social distancing has become the new reality and many workplace meetings will continue to be held remotely. As you may know, the New York State Forum has its own Toastmasters Club, and we have the president, Jim Hall, here to introduce Joshua in a moment. Corinne Brennan from Corporate Computer Solutions, treasurer of the Forum Toastmasters Club, will follow Joshua and share details of the Forum's Toastmasters Club. We welcome everyone, including members of other clubs who have joined this call. I'll now turn this over to Mike Montone, who will discuss some housekeeping issues.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the call. So currently, everyone is muted on entry. Please make sure to keep your mics muted throughout this presentation. I believe Joshua, he will be requesting help or participation in some portions of his presentation. At that point, please feel free, please use the hand raise option on the WebEx panel. There's a small button for a hand where you can click on that button. If you are dialing in using a phone, you can click *3 to raise your hand. At that time, we'll go ahead and unmute your mic, and you can chime in. Also, feel free to use the WebEx chat feature. You can type in any questions or comments that you have. So now, at that point, I believe I hit everything. I'm going to turn this over to Jim Hall from Stellar Services. He's the president of the Albany chapter of Toastmasters.
Great. Good morning. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Christine. We're pleased to help present a session today on Toastmasters International. I believe at least 3 chapters are represented on the call today, 3 clubs. You'll hear first from Joshua Edwards, and he's going to have a great presentation that'll give us an overview of what's involved and how you can benefit. At the back end, I'll do a brief presentation on the New York State Forum Club and how you can get involved if we're an organization you might want to join. Anyway, Joshua, I want to turn it over to you now and let you take the floor. Welcome.
Thank you so much, President Hall, and thank you everyone for being here today. Welcome to the New York State Forum members and Toastmasters members and Empire Toastmasters members, and especially my home club, New York Toastmasters members, for any of you who are on the call. I'm so excited to be here, and I thank you for taking the time to listen to me talk for a little bit about something that has been near and dear to my heart for the past 5 years, and that is, of course, my involvement in Toastmasters. So what I'd like to accomplish today are basically 3 things. First, I'll give you a little bit of my journey through Toastmasters, how I found it, what I've been able to accomplish and learn. And then I'd like to give you some of the nuts and bolts skills related to public speaking. For example, crafting a speech and delivering a speech. And as part of that, I will address that faceless enemy that we all have to deal with called nerves. And then lastly, I don't want to be the only voice that you hear today. So towards the end, I'm going to have a chance for some of you to respond to what are called table topics. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with what that is, but since we have quite a few people on the call, don't get too nervous. We're only going to hear from about 5 of you. So that's the overview for today. Now, 45 minutes is just not enough time to go into great detail on any one of these topics. So if there's one overall thing that I hope that you take away from today, it's the power of storytelling. That's what we do when we give a speech or when we present publicly to other people. We're, yes, perhaps in a work context, we're sharing information, but to make things more effective and to relate to our fellow human beings, it always involves telling a story. And so what I'd like to do is take you back to the fall of 2015. A friend of mine said, Joshua, let's go check this thing out called Toastmasters. It's Monday night from 6:30 to 8:30, and it's free. I had no idea what it involved. I heard the word toast and I thought, do you literally learn how to pick up a glass and clink it with your silverware and give a toast? So anyway, because it was free and I was curious, I agreed to go. The president at the time, Pamela, right at 6:30, stood up and greeted everyone warmly and loudly, and she had us all get up on our feet and recite the mission statement, a statement that's near and dear to my heart to this day. The mission at New York Toastmasters is to help us build our communication skills, develop our leadership ability, boost our self-confidence, and help us find our voice. Then Pamela turned the meeting over to the Toastmaster, who was like the MC for the evening. And the Toastmaster explained that the meeting was in 3 parts. We had table topics, followed by prepared speeches, followed by evaluations. After some introductions, she turned the meeting over to the table topics master. And that individual explained that they had prepared some impromptu questions that people were going to come up, both members and guests, and respond for 1 minute. So you had to be on your feet, facing the audience, responding to a question right on the spot. And I'll never forget that the table topics master asked this question. Tell us about a time in high school or college that a teacher or professor gave you a hard time, and did you deserve it? Joshua Edwards, come on up. Now there I was sitting in the back of the room thinking that I wouldn't be called on. It's a funny little thing that people think that sitting in the back means you won't be called on, but your name is right there on the sign-in sheet, so it doesn't make you immune. So I walked up to the front of the stage, I turned around and I faced the audience of about 60 or 70 people. And I said, I have to tell you about Dr. Childs. He was my senior year choir director in college. So I was a voice major in college studying classical singing. And what that means is I had to be enrolled in the college chorus every semester, all 8 semesters. My second semester of my senior year, I was performing in the chorus of the Nashville Opera, which was a professional opera company. And I worked up the nerve to go up to one of the leads and say, I love your singing. Do you possibly teach private lessons? And they told me, yes, I do, but my schedule is very busy. So if you want to have a lesson, I can only give you this 1 hour on Friday at 1 o'clock. Well, unfortunately, Friday at 1 o'clock overlapped with the dress rehearsal of my chorus concert with Dr. Childs. So I said, well, I thought to myself, my attendance has been perfect. This should be fine. I can miss 1 dress rehearsal. So I emailed Dr. Childs and explained why I was going to miss the rehearsal. Well, he emailed me back and he said, Joshua, I want to have no further dealings with you, and I'm considering kicking you out of the chorus and failing you. And of course, if I didn't get that credit, I was not going to graduate from college on time. So to make a long story short, after several meetings with my advisors and even with the dean of the school, I was able to stay in the chorus. I got to have the voice lesson, and I got to perform in the chorus concert, and Dr. Childs gave me a B- for the class. It turns out that that night, I won Best Table Topics Responder. What that taught me was that people were actually interested in hearing the story that I had to share. And so I was hooked. I kept going back week after week. Our club meets every Monday, 4 or 5 Mondays a month. And I was on the waiting list for about 6 months to join, until finally, in the early part of 2016, a spot became available and I got to join New York Toastmasters. Now I'd like to move into going from table topics into the experience of crafting a speech. And one thing that is so critical for being an effective speaker is sticking to the time. So a table topics is a 1 to 2 minute response. A prepared speech, most of them are 5 to 7 minutes. Some projects go longer, 15 to 20 or even up to 40 minutes. But for the majority, a speech is 5 to 7 minutes. And we actually have a function, a role in the meeting called timer. And when you're giving a speech, the timer actually holds up a green card to let you know that you've met the minimum time at 5 minutes. At 6 minutes, they hold up a yellow card, and that lets you know that you are now 1 minute away from the maximum time. And if you go to 7 minutes, they hold up the red card. Now, once you see the red card, you have 30 seconds to wrap up. And if you go beyond that, then the timer announces that you're disqualified from winning the award for Best Speaker of the evening. That's not the end of the world. It's not the worst thing that could ever happen. And it does happen rather frequently. But what is awful is when the audience thinks they're going to hear a 5 to 7 minute speech, and the speaker is now entering their 11th minute. It's not only disrespectful to the audience, but it also makes the audience think, when are they going to finish the speech? So we're very strict on time. And what I've learned giving about 40 speeches is that when you're on stage talking, the time flies. You may think it feels like an eternity when you are on stage talking, but it actually goes by so quickly. So you have to know exactly what you're going to say. And it's all about preparing and planning whatever the speech is. If I'm preparing for a 5 to 7 minute speech, I'll aim for 5 minutes because I know that the audience reaction, like laughter or gasps, or sometimes people even will shout out comments, that eats up more time. And I have to pause to let them all enjoy that moment. So I always aim for the lower side of whatever the time is. Now, even in a longer presentation like this, which is supposed to be about 45 minutes, it's okay that it's longer, but I still have to meet the audience expectation. And I'm glad that Christine started on time and that we're going to end on time, because that is respecting the audience's expectation. Now, when it comes down to actually writing a speech, and again, I know this is not new information, but it's so fundamental to having a successful speech. The structure has to be clear. A beginning, a middle with your main points, and an ending. And that brings up the question, should I memorize my speech? Now, there are two schools of thought on that, and both are equally valid. When you go to the highest level in Toastmasters, every year in the summer, they have the World Championship contest for public speaking. Every word of those competitors' speeches are precisely planned, including the vocal variety and the body movement. So those speeches are very well rehearsed and very well memorized. For me, though, I'm not at that level. And so I like to type my speech, but what I use instead of memorization is I use mind mapping. Mind mapping is where you rehearse your speech, but in your mind, you see the points that you're going to go to in the middle. So from this point to this point to this point. And as long as you've practiced and you know how you're going to transition from point to point, or we call in music, elide or an elision, then in your mind, you can stay on track and move forward in your speech without having to have it memorized. There are two lines that I always memorize: the beginning and the ending. To use a cheesy analogy, it's like a flight that's taking off. If you have a solid anchor for a beginning, that helps you jettison into the air so that you can give your speech and have smooth sailing. And if you have your ending line memorized, you know exactly how you're going to bring the plane down and land it. So those are your two strongest anchor points, and that helps you have a smooth, successful speech. Now, word choice and sentence structure. Without going into too much detail, the challenge for me is always, when I type, I end up sounding like an academic essay. And that's not what a speech should sound like. So if your sentences start going beyond 2 lines, you probably need to find a way to go back and break them up and make them shorter, make them memorable, and have some impact for the audience. For the Toastmasters who are on the call today, you're all familiar with the grammarian, but anyone who's not familiar with Toastmasters, this is a very important function. A member signs up to be the grammarian, and what that person does is they actually count the number of times that every person in the meeting says a filler word like ah, you know, and like. Filler words are our brain's way of filling an uncomfortable silence while we're trying to figure out what is the next thing we're supposed to say. But it actually weakens the power of the speaker on stage. And so a valuable skill to practice, instead of saying just pause. Let there be a nice moment of silence. silence can be just as powerful, sometimes more powerful, than the words that we actually speak. In fact, one of our members, Nico, won several first place awards giving a speech titled Pause. And he came out, stood on stage and paused before he delivered his first line. And then, of course, the metaphor was not just pausing in public speaking, but pausing in life when something triggers you and you're about to lash out at somebody else. Pause before that happens. And we're so proud that Nico went so far with that award-winning speech. Now, this one is a hard one because body language and hand gestures and eye contact have completely changed since we're now online. So when you're in a live room, as for the first almost 5 years I was, your speech has to relate to the audience over here, the audience over here, the audience in the far corner back there, the audience in the far corner back there, the people right here in front, and the people all the way in the back. That is something that you can only learn with practice. And every room, if you present in different places, the room will be different. So one time I visited a university Toastmasters, and they were in like a big lecture hall that was long tables and like a semicircular clock. And so the audience was literally, you had to turn sideways to face this half of the audience, and then you had to go from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock to address that side of the audience. So that's something that takes practice, and you can only know that when you see the room and you realize that this is the physical structure that you're in. Now, of course, that's all completely changed since we're now online. My stage is more or less this square on my webcam, but I do try to use variety by backing up, by stepping forward, but there is a skill that we teach, which is don't dance. Dancing is when you're just kind of shuffling around, and that's because there's all this nervous energy in your body, and you might not even be aware of it. It kind of makes you feel a little seasick when somebody dances across the stage. So body movements should be precise, they should be planned. One of my members that I mentor gave a speech recently about being a shy girl, and she used her body language to show the shyness, but then she watched a beautiful belly dancer and she was so inspired by that. And then one day she became the center stage and did her belly dancing on stage. And that was a perfect chance for her to use her body language to tell the story. Eye contact is another challenge online because in the audience, in the in-person audience, I have people sometimes sitting 2 feet away from me, and I can look down and make eye contact with the front row, but then I also want to involve people in the very back. And so I try to change my focus to look around. But since we're online, for me to make you feel like I'm making eye contact, I have to stare at that little dot that is my webcam. And so, of course, I'm not seeing anyone's faces, but now it seems as if I'm making eye contact with the audience. So just try to keep in mind, if you are presenting, for example, in a business meeting or you're a unit manager or just part of a work team, and everyone is online for social distancing for safety, that once in a while, bring your focus up to your webcam, because all of a sudden, even though we know we're not looking into each other's eyes, it still gives us that feeling of human connection. Now let me talk about a very important topic, which is humor. And it's a double-edged sword, because it's very hard to write something that you think is going to be funny and actually know if it is or not. It can be a very uncomfortable moment on stage when you've written a line in your speech that you think is funny and you plan a pause for the laughter and then you don't hear anything. That's a very uncomfortable moment. And the flip side of that is when you're going along giving your speech, no big deal, and all of a sudden you say something and the audience is just roaring. And you think, where did that even come from? That wasn't supposed to be funny. So there's an art to humor. Again, with 45 minutes, it's not something that I can go deeply into, but we have a whole path in Toastmasters called humorous speaking, and they give you different projects where you learn how to incorporate humor. The most important thing, again, it's a very oversimplification, is not to force it. So for example, I gave a speech on my last day of being the president of New York Toastmasters, and I talked about the things I was grateful for. And I said, I'm grateful for being home with my family, for my job that I'm able to do remotely, and for my members of Toastmasters. And I said, and also I was able to get a much needed haircut because I was looking rather like a mad scientist. So keep humor simple and don't try to force it. Now let's talk about the moment you've prepared a speech, and let's say it's your icebreaker. Throughout Toastmasters, the very first speech that anyone gives is called the icebreaker. It's literally a 4 to 6 minute speech, shorter than the usual 5 to 7. It's a chance to introduce yourself to the club and to share a story so that they can get to know you, and it's a chance to tell them something that's very important that you really want them to know about yourself. We are all nervous before an icebreaker, and even several dozen speeches later, seasoned speakers still get nervous. So what do? How do we calm our nerves? Even if we have the skills, we have the humor, we have the timing, we have the body language and the vocal variety, but we get nervous. Well, as a part gift to my club, I brought in a holistic doctor to teach us a 1-hour workshop on how to calm the nervous system when we're faced with a flight or fight situation, which public speaking definitely is. We've all probably heard the statistic that public speaking is the #1 fear ahead of even dying. So it's no joke. So for 1 hour, Dr. Jeffrey Migdow took us through a workshop all about relaxation and breathing and muscle exercises. I know that all of you have probably done some version of that in your yoga, your exercise, your Pilates, spiritual practices, religious. It's not new, but it's so important, and sometimes we just need to remember to do it. So it's worth taking 30 seconds right now for us all to just do a fundamental breathing and stretching. And it's completely up to you. If you want to stand up, fine. If you want to stay seated, that's fine. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, fine. If not, it's completely up to you. I just want us all to breathe in together through our nose for a count of 5. Then we're going to hold for 5, and then we're going to exhale through our nose for 5. Okay? So let's start. And then hold and release. Now this time, let's do it one more time. And let's breathe in and fill up your lungs and your belly as much as you can for 5. Ready? Inhale. And hold. Exhale. And now if you want to open your eyes or leave them closed, just roll your shoulders back and really stretch out. There's so much tension. When Dr. Migdow had us do this exercise, I didn't realize how much tension I had. And then you can stretch your arms overhead. This is called the spider. Relax your fingers. Again, that's a very surface level kind of walkthrough, but it's so important to do. And I hope you can feel the difference if you were able to do that. Breathing deeply and exhaling slowly can calm your nervous system down. And your body, when you're on stage, just like if you're a performer in a show, is your instrument from head to toe. So everything needs to be relaxed. So it's something that's worth exploring if you haven't gone into relaxation techniques, whatever form you prefer or that relates to you. And finally, we get to the delivery of the icebreaker, the first speech. So what I'd like to do is give you an abbreviated version of the speech that I shared, and it was called The Day I Made History. I moved to New York City in 2008 from Florida to pursue my dream of being a professional performer. I had sold new construction until the financial crisis happened. And that's when I said, it's time to go follow your dream. So I came up on a one-way ticket and 2 suitcases and slept on a couch at a friend's apartment. For the first year, all I did was audition for Broadway shows, national tours, and cruise ships. A year later, I hadn't gotten my big break, but I was also almost broke. So now I had to find a new way to support myself in New York City. Well, I was talking with a good friend of mine, Hallie. Hallie and I were best friends in high school, and she went on to go to school and became an attorney. She said to me, Joshua, you should look at becoming a court reporter. I said, a what? She said, a court reporter. And I said, isn't that the little old lady that types machine in court? And she said, yeah, but it's more sophisticated than that now. You're really good with computers, you have a good vocabulary, and they make really good money. I bet you would be successful. And so I looked it up and found a court reporting school in Manhattan. The day that I went there and saw the stenography machine, I was hooked. They explained how we don't spell words. We hit several keys at once like a chord on a piano. And those strokes make phonetic sounds, which is how we can create the words at such high speed. Well, I was no stranger to practicing for several hours a day because I had taught myself to play the piano when I was 13 years old. And so this machine to me was just like a musical instrument, but with words instead of sounds. And so I could practice from sunrise to sunset on the weekends and not even realize how much time was passing. So in a program that took some people 4 to 5 years to finish, I was out in 14 months. I got up to the graduation speed of 225 words per minute. Almost immediately, I was busy taking depositions at law firms, and I did that for 5 years, and sure enough, was making fantastic money in New York City. And then a job opening became available in federal court to be an official court reporter. At first, I wasn't even going to apply because I thought, I don't think I'm of that caliber. One of my professors said, Joshua, just apply. If they don't think you're ready, they won't offer you an interview. But if they give you the job, you can take it. And if you love it, you can stay there for the rest of your career. If you don't like it, you just resign. So I sent in my resume and they interviewed me on a Friday. And Monday morning, they called me and said, when can you start? So sure enough, I became an official federal court reporter in the Eastern District of New York, right at the end of the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, as I started going around working with the various judges, one of them learned that I was a trained singer. And so on a break during court, she said to me, Joshua, I want to hear you sing sometime. So I seized the opportunity and I stood up right there in the courthouse and I gave her a little Italian Puccini. Nessun dorma. She was so impressed that she emailed me later that afternoon and said, I want you to give a full-blown performance in my courtroom from me and my staff. That was supposed to be about 10 people. But by the time we picked a day later in the week, and by the time my performance came around, word of the singing court reporter had gotten around the whole courthouse, which had about 25 judges. And when I actually finally walked in to perform, the courtroom was packed with judges, marshals, security, and my fellow reporters. So I like to say that I made history by being, at least to my knowledge, the first person ever to sing an aria in a packed courtroom live in the Eastern District of New York. And I like to say that even though I didn't become Broadway's Phantom of the Opera, I became the Phantom of court reporting. So that was my icebreaker speech. You hear so many incredible stories and you learn so many things that you would have never been exposed to by becoming a member of Toastmasters. And if you attend regularly, our meeting meets every week, so we have 5 speakers. So that means at the end of a month, you've heard 20 different speeches, and you learn an incredible amount, and you see people grow, and you see them blossom from being nervous, shy speakers to being confident, center stage, and delivering their story. Now, the third part of the Toastmasters meeting, after the speeches, are the evaluations. A different member gets up to give an evaluation of each speech. I like to say that giving an evaluation is like going into the gym and working out a completely different muscle set than you worked the day before when you gave the speech. For example, you need to use a new set of machines, you need to use new movements, and you're going to get different results. So whereas table topics are impromptu, right on the spot, speeches are prepared, and you can spend several weeks writing and rehearsing and revising your speech. An evaluation is listening and responding basically right then and there to the speaker, but you have a few minutes to prepare your comments. A classic evaluation will cover broadly 3 things: the structure of the speech and the content, what was in it and how well was it put together. And then the evaluator will say what they thought the speaker did well. And most importantly, the evaluator will talk about where the speaker can improve in the future. Constructive criticism. We like to call it the sandwich method. A compliment, a constructive criticism, followed by another compliment. Evaluations are 2 to 3 minutes. And I'd like to share the most poignant evaluation that I've ever received in my club. It came from our past president, Raphael. After giving about maybe a dozen speeches, I'd learned that people liked hearing my performing stories and hearing me sing. So I was starting to use more of that in my speeches. So one day I gave a speech, and Raphael came up to evaluate me, and he said, "We have 2 Joshuas. We have Joshua the performer that we love and we adore, and we have Joshua the speaker. And while it's fun for us to get to see Joshua the performer, I would like to see him not rely on that as a crutch when he's being Joshua the speaker." And that taught me a valuable lesson, that when I get up to speak on stage, I'm not giving a performance. I'm not playing a role where I've memorized lines and I'm making believe that I'm somebody else, but that I need to be the real Joshua and share a real story. We call that being vulnerable, and it can be uncomfortable for people, but that is what allows the audience to be receptive to hearing what you say. And so when I do use the performing Joshua, like I just did, it's very sparing. It's just for a moment and just to make a point. I don't rely on it, because that, again, is a crutch. It's like a comfort zone for me. Incidentally, Raphael also gave another excellent evaluation of a member who completely lost his lines on stage and had to abandon his speech. That is perhaps one of the most uncomfortable moments you can imagine, both for the speaker and the audience, because the speaker is probably dying on the inside, and the audience is also very uncomfortable. But Toastmasters is not a place where you're supposed to be giving a finished, polished speech. That's what the World Championship of Public Speaking is for. Once you get to that level, yes, you're held to that very high standard. But when you're in the club, it's okay to fail. It's okay to forget your lines. It's okay to stumble. And Raphael came up and so Dan, the member, had given a speech about the health effects of sugar. And he had so many facts and figures, numbers, and it was just too much information, and it overloaded his brain, and he lost his place. So about 3 minutes in, he said, "I'm sorry, I can't go on." And when Raphael came up, he said, "Dan is a fantastic speaker. So let's just talk about what happened." And that made us all relax. It addressed the issue of what to do when you forget your lines. And then he evaluated the rest of the first part of Dan's speech that he was able to deliver. So a good evaluator can march right into what I call the line of fire, the uncomfortable part, the elephant in the room that needs to be addressed. It makes the evaluation memorable and valuable. I'd like to move on now to the second part of the Toastmasters journey. I invite some of you to respond to table topics. And I'd like to talk about the side of Toastmasters that doesn't really have to do with public speaking, and that is leadership development. Now, if you've heard some business quotes from leaders like Warren Buffett and others, you can basically see a theme that they all believe that being an excellent public speaker and being an excellent leader are basically two skills that go hand in hand. So for the first year, when I was a member, I was working on giving speeches and being evaluated. And then Pamela, the president that I told you about, emailed me and she said, "Joshua, we've noted your enthusiasm for the club, and I have an excellent opportunity for you." She wanted me to become an officer. The club has 8 officer positions, and they each have very important and different responsibilities to keep the club running smoothly. So she wanted me to become what's called the sergeant at arms. The sergeant at arms is the person who's responsible for showing up early on site and setting up the room, and also setting up our Toastmasters banner, which has all the ribbons of all of our various accomplishments, and also greeting all of the guests that come in. So even though technically it's really just the person who sets the room up and orders supplies, it actually becomes the first Toastmaster member that our first-time guests encounter right at the sign-in at the front door. So I did that role for a year and I loved it. Then I became the vice president of membership, who responds to all of the numerous emails that come in. And we get so many emails from people all over the world who've heard about our club and who want to attend. Then after a year of that, I became the vice president education. That role is like the cheerleader who keeps the members engaged and keeps following up with them saying, "Let's have another speech from you," and also submits their education awards when they finish a path in Pathways. And then finally, my fourth and most recent role, which I just am enjoying my retirement, was the president. And this year, of course, brought a unique challenge in that we had the pandemic. And all of a sudden, we had to figure out how to move the meeting online. Now, I have to say, the challenge wasn't so much how to do it. That pretty much worked itself out. The real difficult decision was that we had to come to terms we actually had to do it. We have such a cherished community. We're so warm and welcoming and open, and we have a legendary reputation, and people respond to that. And we were so afraid of losing that if we had to go from that to a computer screen. Well, the decision ended up being made for us because the governor declared a state of emergency. And Toastmasters came out with a statement saying, basically, you got to go online. It's too dangerous right now with coronavirus. So for 1 week at the beginning of March, we had to cancel a meeting because we were just right in the middle of everything. And by the following week, there we were online. Our first couple of weeks, we used GoToMeeting, and then we morphed into Zoom. There were a few challenges, but also a few advantages. And that's the important thing of looking for the opportunity in a very challenging time, because ultimately that's what we're in. And we don't know when it's going to end. And it can be very overwhelming to get swept away in thinking about all of the terrible things. But what good has come of it? All of a sudden, we have members who have gone home to South Africa. We have an officer in South Africa, an officer in New Zealand, a member in Canada, a couple of members like me. Right now I'm down in Florida at my parents' house, even though I live in Manhattan. And we can expand our audience so much further. We literally have no boundaries now because of the power of the internet. And so at the beginning, when we went online, we decided, myself and the other officers, we're going to keep this members only because we have to do this right. We don't want to lose that wonderful community that we've created. And we don't know how this is going to work. We don't know if the speeches are going to be as effective, how the Toastmaster is going to lead the meeting, how people are going to clap for each other. And we've ended up using jazz hands, so the claps are silent, but you can see the webcam and you can feel the enthusiasm. So we just wanted to make sure that we did it the right way. And now that we're in our 16th, I think, week, we have the new officers, the new president, Alona, and her team of officers have started inviting more guests into the meeting. And so now we've gone from having 18 people to about 20 to maybe 30. Now we're up to about 50. Because of technology, because of Zoom, we could hold hundreds, but I don't think we want to go that big. But what that lets us do is have that many more people involved and participate. And finally, I'll close with, speaking of participation, I told you at the beginning I didn't want to be the only person that was speaking today. So I'd like to simulate a little table topic session here, and I'm going to ask for the help of, I think, Mike from the forum. What I'd like to do is, with this many people on the call, I can't see everyone's names, so we're just going to have to take volunteers. In our meetings, we call on people, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a table topics question, just like I did when the table topics master asked the question, who gave you a hard time in college? And I had a perfect story to respond to. If when I ask the question, you think in your mind, oh, I have the perfect thing to say in response to that, I have to tell this story, just click the raise hand button and we will have the New York State Forum call on you. So I'm going to ask 5 questions, so this won't take too long. Okay, so we'll start with an easy one. The first question is, tell us about your best vacation. It could be one that you've taken or one that you want to take. So I'll ask Mike if he sees any hands going up to respond to, tell us about your best vacation. And it could be one that's already happened or one that you hope will happen in the future.
Looks like Kathy Kittle has raised her hand. Kathy,
Wonderful.
your mic is now unmuted.
My best vacation was when my entire family, all 22 of us, my sisters, my parents, their children, and even an invited friend, all went to Bermuda together for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. A cruise is a wonderful opportunity. You get to meet lots of people, but it can be a little daunting, and so many different activities. If you're not an outgoing person, you can kind of get lost in the shuffle. On the ship with 22 people in our party, there was always an opportunity for you to run into someone, sometimes not in the most convenient of places, but we had people of all ages enjoying each other's company. And we traveled down to Bermuda, which is a beautiful island, and the ship was amazing. It was huge. But even the activities on the ship, that was not the highlight of the travel. The travel highlight was really us getting together, spending time together, and enjoying the excursions, enjoying the dinners, enjoying the chance meetings up on the deck and saying, hey, what did you do today? So I have to say that was probably my very best vacation. And we've gone back to Bermuda since, but it was never the same. It was such a wonderful experience and one that I'll treasure always. Thank you.
Excellent, Kathy. Thank you so much. I'm sure a lot of us can't wait for it to become safe to cruise again, but that might be a while. And Bermuda sounds just fantastic. All right, number 2. Imagine you had to give a presentation at a local high school and tell a bunch of high schoolers all about your job in terms that they can understand. Describe your job in that way.
A lot of names to scroll through here.
Yeah.
Frank Palmieri, it looks like your hand is raised. I'll unmute your mic.
Thank you, Frank.
My job to high schoolers, I would say it's with computers, and I would say, yes, it sounds like a good job to be in if you know, computers are the new thing, but be careful because it requires a lot of attention to detail and a lot of paying really close attention to minutia of things that you might not otherwise know about. So while the young people might think of computers as iPads and iPhones and Game Boys and things like that, those of us in the field know it's a lot of time spent working long hours on very esoteric sometimes and detailed things that no one knows what you're talking about. So I'd say, if you want to work with computers, I'd say to the high schools, research the topic, talk to people like me who do it, or other computer programmers and people, and then see if it's something that you want to maybe take a stab at. So do a little research first.
Excellent. Thank you. It's great. You were able to work in some advice in addition to just explaining what the job is. Well done. Number 3, this one is going a little bit broader. What is one thing you wish could be different in the world? That's one of those big picture questions. One thing, if you could pick one thing, not saying there's only one thing. Do we have any hands for that? What would you change in the world? Or what is one thing that you wish could be different?
I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, I see Catherine. I can't see the last name. Catherine Henningsen. Your mic is now unmuted.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Repeat the question again.
Yes. What is one thing that you wish could be different in the world? Are we having some trouble with Catherine?
Yeah, wait a minute.
Catherine, we can hear you fine if you just want to. Oh, now you're muted. Can't hear you.
Okay, I don't know how to get my picture to be bigger. It's down in the corner.
You look good to us. We can see you. You're centered.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm ready to hear the question again.
Okay. What is one thing that you wish could be different in the world? Or you can spin it and say, if you could change one thing, what would you change?
If there was one thing that I would like to see change in the world, it's how people treat each other. And I have a nonprofit organization called All Spirits Kindred, and the purpose of that organization is to deliver community education programs and make the world a better place. I think the world would be much better if we treated each other like we would want to be treated. And that's it, because I forgot my second point.
Oh, that's excellent. Can you tell us All Kindred Spirits is the name?
All Spirits Kindred.
Oh, All Spirits Kindred.
When I incorporated it in 1997, I chose to say it that way because when you say all kindred spirits, that's exclusionary. It means to me some are not.
Ah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's what's great about the Toastmasters experience is now I've heard of something that I didn't know existed before. And it sounds like you're already doing the thing, responding to the question. So well done. And it looks like somebody in chat wants to know more about it. Thank you for sharing. Okay, we have time. I have 2 more. Tell us about someone important in your life who was a mentor, leader, or coach. How did they support or encourage you? Any volunteers? Tell us about a mentor, leader, or coach and how they supported or encouraged you, maybe through a difficult time or something you had to do or learn.
Carmela Lagoy,
Excellent.
you are now unmuted.
Right now, my current assistant director, he has been mentoring me and teaching me things, and now especially being at home working with 2 small children, and also teaching my child from home. He's just been a great inspiration and a great help, and really giving me the encouragement needed to continue to do my job well.
Fantastic. All right, thank you. Didn't quite make the minute, but it's a trial run, so that's perfectly fine.
Sorry,
Thank
I got
you.
a kid screaming in the background, so I needed to stop.
No worries. We appreciate it. Thank you for being willing to respond. All right, the last one, and then I will bring my portion to a close and turn it over to our host. Give us a song lyric that is meaningful for you. Tell us where it came from, who wrote it, and why it's so special. Since I have a music background, I want to hear somebody else's musical penchant.
Looks like Adam Muzz. Adam, your mic is unmuted.
Adam,
Thank you, Mike. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, the lyric is, one good thing about music is when it hits you, you feel no pain. And it's from Mr. Bob Marley. The reason it's significant to me is kind of what we've been talking about too with the everybody treat everybody the way you should be treated. Music is a great equalizer in that you can all listen to it from a different background, from a different structure, and it hits you in whichever way makes you feel great. And that's why I think music is actually a good factor in what can bring us all together now in the climate that we're in, because with music, there's no opinion. It's just music. And I think that's a really great thing we can have in the current climate. And I hope that everybody can come together now and use this moment as the time for everybody to come together.
Excellent, Adam. Thank you so much. Thank you, all 5 of our respondents, for being willing to participate and get me off the hook for a few minutes. And I'd like to thank the New York State Forum for making this hour available to us, and thank everyone who joined. It was a pleasure.
Josh, we still have some additional content that we want to show.
Yes. I'm going to turn it over now back to President Hall. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Joshua. Great presentation. Thank you for coming to us today with everything you've conveyed. Your presentation certainly was informative and entertaining. I will not be singing, but I did wear a collared shirt, which my colleagues from our club know is unusual for me these days. I want to run through real quick just a couple slides about our club. There are many clubs represented on this call. We are just one. Joshua is past president of another. Our club is the New York State Forum Toastmasters Club. We were chartered in 2017 to do the things that Joshua talked about, which is really develop speaking and presentation skills and to enhance leadership abilities. As Joshua conveyed, there's many benefits. We all learn by doing. And the environment is very supportive, constructive. It's meant to help us all grow together. The feedback is constructive. And it's you definitely learn as you go, following a pathway, a learning pathway. Toastmasters gives us the training materials to do that. We execute those training materials in advance. So quickly, our membership, we're open to all New York State Forum members. So if you're a government employee, IT corporate roundtable staff, consider joining us. Our membership right now consists mainly of state, municipal, and corporate employees. We're at about 20 people right now and growing. And with us today, we always want to acknowledge the people that we work with. Our club is well represented today. You heard Kathy Kittle there. She's our Vice President of Education. She participated in Table Topics. Frank Palmieri, he's one of our past presidents who's on the call. And he also responded in Table Topics. George is our past president. He's on. Jackie Kessler, I believe, is on. Lena Goslin was on briefly. And Michelle Denny is our Vice President of Public Relations. We have a very experienced and talented group, and the quality of presentations is very high. And what's most probably compelling is that the membership, ours is been able to advance into the district competitions. Kathy, Frank, and Jackie have gone on further in district competition and done very well. I'm Jim Hall. I'm the president of the New York State Forum Club. Also on the line with us today is Corinne Brennan, who's our treasurer, and she wants to say a few words. Corinne?
Corinne, you're mute. I just unmuted your mic.
Oh, okay. Thank you again to Jim and Joshua. Great presentation. We're really pleased that you joined us today. Just a few quick details. Our club, the third and fifth Wednesday of each month, 4 to 5:30. We plan that towards the end of the day to make it easier for our members. Recently, we've been virtual on WebEx, as most of the rest of the world. Soon, we hope to return to in-person meetings, and they will be at the New York State Forum offices. But as we know, this all has to do with the phased back to work situation that we're all in. We'd love to have that under our control, but as soon as we can, we will. How do you know if Toastmasters is right for you? This is something that the very first thing you should do is go off and visit a club. We'd like it to be our club, but there are other options, and you're probably going to visit at least a couple of times. And you also should visit a couple of different clubs. So that way you get a sense. You need to join a club that you feel comfortable with. The next thing you're probably going to cover just 2 or 3 things that are probably top of mind for you right now. But then afterwards, Jim and I are willing to stay on the WebEx if you have questions now. But another question that I think oftentimes people have in mind is, what's going to be your investment? An individual pays dues to Toastmasters International. This isn't something that you pay to the forum. Your treasurer in each club facilitates that. So twice a year, you're paying $45 and a new member fee of $20. And what that gets you is the materials that Jim mentioned a couple of slides ago. So this is something that you've got a syllabus, a group of a wealth of materials that have been developed internationally and have been very successful. The next thing you probably want to think about is, how are you going to find a meeting? Certainly here in Albany, we'd like you to consider ours. Now, also on the call today are a few folks from the Empire Club, which came out of the Department of Health down in the plaza. I think they also include other state agencies. That's an option. Teachers Retirement System has a club. DOT has a closed club for 50 Wolf Road. There's a lot of options locally here. And then there are dozens of clubs across New York State, including New York City, where you're going to see a multitude of options. Now, we can advise you regardless of your location. We're not going to talk with you if you're not interested in our club. So I would suggest that you contact us by using the info@newyorkstateforum.org email address, and then someone from our club will reach out to you and help you on your path to Toastmasters. And again, thank you, everyone. I love seeing all these names. For those of you that I haven't seen in a while, welcome, and look forward to seeing you again. Now, what Jim is going to do is he's going to take down the questions slide, so that way, if you go into grid view, you can see all of us. And please come forward with your questions.
Feel free to unmute your mic if you have a question. Or again, you can use your raise hand option and I'll unmute you.
I did notice that someone asked the question, Toastmasters, and I think someone answered that in the chat, but whomever answered that, I think that's a good thing to go back and talk about. I think it was Frank that you answered that question. Would you like to tell us about it so everybody hears it?
Say again, Corinne, what is it?
What's the difference between Toastmasters and the Moth?
Oh yeah. Well, The Moth is a great radio show on NPR. People write personal essays, and somehow or another, The Moth finds out about them. Then they invite you on, and you get to read them. It's in front of an audience, and the really good essays, oh boy, you get a lot of laughs and a lot of fun. The Moth is really good. Now, If you ever want to do something like that, Toastmasters is the way to learn how to do that. Because again, as Joshua said so eloquently, it's non-judgmental, it's supportive, you get to practice, all kinds of topics, all kinds of subjects. If you've ever thought about doing any kind of speaking at all, even in your local church or PTA or at the school, or of course in meetings at work, Toastmasters is where you learn how to do it. It's like anything else, repetition. The better you do it, the better you get at it, the more you do. I tell you, I wish I had started Toastmasters when I started my career with New York State. I would have been retired by now. That's how confident I really believe in the program. If for those of you who are in it, you know what I'm talking about. The camaraderie, the fun we have is it's unmatched anywhere else. If you're on the call and you're not sure about Toastmasters, like Corinne said, like Jim said, like Joshua said, feel free to visit a meeting as a guest. All the clubs would love to have you. They'll make you feel welcome. When you find one that works out for your time, that fits your busy schedule, then that's the one you might want to try. So the whole program is terrific, and I can't speak highly enough about it. It's just a great program.
There's a question from Alice Citriana. I'm employed in New York City. Membership is encouraging while it's virtual. Membership is encouraging while it's virtual. However, when this becomes in person again, what then happens with our membership?
I'll just say from my club's point of view, I don't think any different. The dues are the same. And once it becomes safe to reopen, I think a lot of clubs are going to find that people are going to want to have access to having the meeting streamed as well. And some people are not going to feel comfortable traveling regardless, understandably. So the membership will continue regardless of what form it takes. And our dues, by the way, are $200 for the year. As you heard, $45 twice annually, or $90 goes to Toastmasters. So that means our club makes $110, and then the one-time $20 new member fee. But it's hands down the best value, especially in New York City, to get this kind of exposure and training and education for $200. That's a night out at a nice restaurant and a couple of drinks.
That's again something that you will discover as you look at different clubs. Each club takes the basics of Toastmasters and then does something that is specific to their club, such as Joshua is mentioning there.
I'll put my email in the chat so that anyone who wants to follow up with me later, I'd love to continue the conversation. Let me just make sure I spell it right. And please don't forget, my middle initial is B, and that needs to be in my email. 1980@gmail. There you go.
Any other questions coming up? Well, Josh, a big round of applause to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We had 3 clubs on the line and everybody appreciated it. I guess this is a Toastmaster thing. We appreciate it. The forum thanks you. And thank you, Corinne and Jim and the rest of the forum Toastmasters for joining as well. It was a very valuable presentation and we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.